certainly illustrates the diversity of the word.
And I think that pretty much sums up what we saw over the weekend.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Welcome back, everybody. F1 Philosophy, episode 34. We're going to try and unwrap what we saw on the Qatar Grand Prix. No producer Gatsby today. We felt we just kind of need to get into it and start talking. And I feel like Norman Reedus and what's his nuts here summed that up pretty well.
Yeah, I don't remember his name either. That's a very forgettable name in movie cinema.
Yeah.
These were the only two movies he's ever done.
That's not true.
I think he's like in like a random Jack Reacher or something. You know what I mean? He's like in those random movies.
Yes, and he did a Saw as well, one of the lesser known Saws.
Of course he did a lesser known Saw.
Anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
What are we here to talk about?
Qatar Grand Prix.
The recap of the Qatar Grand Prix, yes. And then going to the last weekend.
Which, it's the last weekend. Can you believe we've made it this far?
Yeah, well, people keep listening. People keep watching. I think they actually like us.
We'll see.
If you look at the map of downloads, we're worldwide. We're known worldwide. We're known in Singapore.
We are. Yes, I saw that.
Wild.
Also, I saw a pin in the UK, not far from Silverstone.
So either Aston Martin or Red Bull's listening to us?
Maybe.
Lance Stroll. It's like, I want to hear what Canadians think of me. Yeah.
Except he lives in Switzerland.
Does he?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Just retire. Dude, you have the life. Like, I want that life.
Yeah.
Great introduction, Sean. You should do this more often because I just get off the rails.
I don't know. I didn't hit any of the talking points, but at this point, season's over, so.
We're trying new things. Okay, so this is something we don't normally do, but we don't always go over our predictions from the week before right away, and we should do that.
Yes. Let's get it out of the way.
But it also brings us to other talking points, too, because holy did we swing and miss.
Yeah. Well, let's go with yours. So you had Lando, Oscar, Russell, Hamilton, Leclerc.
Mm-hmm.
You got none of those.
Nope, not even close.
No. I had Russell, Hamilton, Oscar, Lando, Max.
Well, at least you had Max in your top five.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
got Oscar.
You had Oscar. Russell, you said 4?
I said first. I thought Russell was going to win, which looked good. It looked good.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll talk about that.
So, I got one there. Yay me. P10, thanks to our new race director. Neither Nick or I got. You had Colapinto. I had Ocon. And we got Norris, who did not deserve to be there.
No, he deserved to be second. We'll get into that in a sec. Colapinto and Ocon, that was a first lap crash, so we did predict correctly that they would be close.
Sure. You can take it that way.
What was your wild card?
My wild card was Perez wins.
He's going to win something.
Even if it's a foot in the ass.
I was going to say, or like a offer he can't refuse, or a retirement package to Fiji. Something along those lines. What was my wild card?
I don't know how. I really don't know how you managed to get this right. 3 safety cars.
And there was exactly 3 safety cars.
When the second one hit, I told myself, there's no fucking way Nick is getting this. And then what was it? A handful of laps between the second and third?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. They could have had just 1, right? So it would have been 2 safety cars. Or a VSC, which wouldn't have counted.
But that's not what we got.
That's not what we got. So the race director affected our P10s and our wildcards. I shouldn't have got that right, and you shouldn't have gotten that wrong. Well, actually, yeah, you would have still got it wrong. Anyways, the point is, the race director was way off. We'll get into that in a sec. Let's go chronologically, though. Okay. As you're the podcast leader today, but I would like to suggest that we start with the sprint.
Take us into it, Nick.
So the sprint was, I'm not going to mince words. It was awful. It was really boring.
It was not fun.
It was just one long DRS train.
Yeah, which is kind of that track.
So why is that track hosting a sprint? There's so many other tracks. Like I think Canada would be ideal for a sprint race.
Well, relevant if it's sprint or the race. The track is not great for F1 cars. I have not witnessed MotoGP around there, but that is a track they go to. The drivers love it, and it makes sense why the drivers love it. It's a very physical track, but it's not very fun to watch.
And I think Oscar said one time too in a random interview, it's counterclockwise, so they get a break on certain muscles. Something along those lines he was saying.
Is it counterclockwise?
No, actually, as I think about it, no, it's not. So I might be thinking of a different.
Clockwise.
Saudi Arabia, I think, is what he was talking about. Is counterclockwise.
Yeah, I forget what the distribution is, but I don't think it's that much of a disparity. It might be that the majority of the corners are one direction in Qatar.
Right. I'm just trying to think, like, they're mostly right.
Yeah, I don't think you have a lot of left-hand turns in Qatar
No.
compared to how many turns there are on the track, because obviously you do need a left hand. So I think that may be what the comment was.
Maybe.
You don't get a rest because you don't have an even distribution side to side. Whereas Japan, for example, I think is the most evenly weighted right-left track because it's a figure eight.
That's why Vettel loves it so much. Yeah. Just as to that point, horrible for us to watch. It looks awful lot like the 82 Las Vegas Grand Prix. Remember the one they said that was awful?
In Caesar's Palace parking lot?
There you go.
Which, yeah, was basically hay bales in a parking lot. It was terrible.
God damn. Yeah, it took a while for America to get Formula One right.
Yeah.
But the sprint was terrible. I just bring it up so we can talk about the differences between the sprint and qualifying, right? Like McLaren dominates the sprint, and Max is terrible, which is, if I was going off of the sprint, I was absolutely right this weekend.
Yep. Sorry, but this is why I don't mind having the sprints, even if they end up being terrible. It is the best race simulation you can get from an engineering standpoint. That's why we saw people take leaps in qualifying, because they didn't have FP2, FP3, but they effectively had, what was it, a third of a race distance to understand what those tires were going to do on, let's say, an intermediate fuel load.
And everybody knew right away that the softs were completely useless.
Yes.
Almost instantly, yeah. I think that's what cost. I don't understand what VCARB was doing. VCARB probably would have got a decent haul of points if they just put them on mediums or hards in the second stint. They went to softs for the last little bit, which was just absolutely ridiculous. If Sauber can get points, you should have definitely got points. But yeah, anyway. Yeah. So I bring that up. I guess you have no other comments about the sprint then.
The only other thing I'll say is that the highlight of the sprint was Lando moving out of the way for Oscar, which when I saw it, I wasn't sure what was going on. And then it was pretty clear he was just letting him by. So, I mean, payback for when Oscar had to do that for Lando. So
In Brazil, yeah.
Yeah.
And Lando sat there and acted like he was all self-righteous. I'm just trying to be fair. I'm not making a big deal of this. But, it was kind of my decision that I'm telling everybody. And then Zach Brown, yeah. Oh, it was Lando's decision. Oh, you're such a saint, Lando. Yeah. Such a nice teammate. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not mad. I'm not salty. I think it was funny. It's just like, keep that one to yourself. Oop. Cut that part out.
So, yeah, that's it. I mean, it was damage limitation in a way for McLaren because they scored a good amount of points in the sprint. But, yeah, it was not fun.
And as we'll talk about in a bit, it shouldn't have had to have been damage limitation.
Right.
But yeah, so just forgive me. It's not Hulkenberg I'm about to make fun of. Kind of. Sort of. It's more praising Max to something we were saying all year that his development skills, his ability to adjust, his ability to find a great car, I think he really is the perfect balance of Senna and Schumacher. In that sense, he's very emotional, as we're going to talk about. Like Senna, very naturally fast, can be very good at qualifying, not as good at Senna. Senna's one-lap pace, I think, is still the best of all time. And Schumacher's ability to find the right car at the right time. He's that perfect balance. And you saw that. To go from struggling in the sprint to 3 hours later dominating qualifying is a testament to how amazing he is. And I think sometimes people forget just how good he is. And we forgot in our Qatar predictions I did at least, to bring about the fact that he was 0.6 down in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. So he potentially had 0.6 more in the bag. So I should have seen a potentially good Qatar coming. And he might have found a good car now for next year. He might have championship capable car in 2025. I think the idea that, myself included, writing off and saying it's a McLaren versus Ferrari constructors next year, that was premature. Max might be in the discussion next year single-handedly, as we will once again talk about later, because so many permutations there as to who will be driving with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think about that?
I mean, you're not wrong. Max definitely deserves to be where he is. Let's put it that way. And I think he's established himself in that team as a leader. His approach may not be what people necessarily want to see, but the team seems to have formed around him. And that's fine. If the team performs, if you have a high-performing team around that specific individual, that's great. Where I think there needs to be a little bit of buffering, let's say, is if next year isn't good and Max decides that he's done, let's go to Mercedes.
Or retire.
But for the sake of what I'm getting at, let's go to Mercedes. And he doesn't do good. And the team rejects him because he's not George, he's not Max. He's a very different individual to both of those. It's a prime example of how that type of person isn't necessarily good everywhere, right? Red Bull has been around Max since his introduction, has learned his intricacies, has come together around that, and that's clear from what we see with Checo, right? Checo can't get behind the car. The team doesn't seem to be able to give him what he needs in the car, but Max gets the most out of it all the time. And yes, he is good even in a bad car. I have a feeling that if you put him in the Williams, he would be able to consistently get it in the upper end of the points.
Top 6.
Sure. Or as I like to call it, Nick's points category.
Thank you. That's a compliment.
That being said, could he be a championship winner in this year's Williams? Probably not. And could he develop that car to a championship winning car? It would depend on the team. Right? So he absolutely deserves everything he's gotten, and that team is there with him. So we'll see what next year brings. Hopefully, with Newey leaving before the development of the car started, the car that we get next year will be a cohesive design from their new technical team, and it will work.
Things still went bad with Newey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like we said, Newey's probably the best of all time. I'm not blaming him for this. I'm just saying, like, this is still Red Bull. This is still an engineering marvel team. It's a really well-engineered team.
We're still human beings.
Yes.
Right? Everybody makes mistakes. You try, you push the boundaries, and you make mistakes.
Yeah, and
It's
maybe,
always gonna happen.
and I liked your theory a couple of weeks ago where you said maybe Newey purposely left him a bad car, which would be funny, knowing he was going to leave. You make mistakes, but also this is a really good team full of engineers. This is still Red Bull, right? They will find something. They will find the right balance. Looks like they might have already have. Or maybe it's just a fluke. I don't know. We'll see in Abu Dhabi this weekend. So we can't count them out is what I'm getting at.
No, absolutely not.
Who finished 7th above him in the sprint? Do you remember?
Not particularly.
Nico Hulkenberg,
I should have known.
who was excellent in the sprint. and was finding things in that Haas and keeping Max at bay.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike to Jekyll and Hyde, or whatever you want to call it, positive, negative, yin yang, in 3 hours, he managed to fuck up his car. Or if didn't change it at all. While everybody else adjusted, he fell off a cliff. And I just bring that up to remind Sauber that everything they've said about him, fast one-lap pace, whatever, development skills, that was thrown out the window. My brother and I were calling each other, texting each other, and my brother's like, how is he so far off between sprint and qualifying? And I said, that speaks to development. That speaks to adjustments. He doesn't know what to do.
Now that you bring this up, I do recall there being some mention of a problem on Hülkenberg's car.
Oh, shut up. I'm trying to rant here.
I know, but someone has to defend the guy.
No,
And
that's fair. What was the problem?
I can't recall exactly what it was, but I do remember somebody saying that Nico was fighting a technical issue in the car. I may be wrong. Maybe that was my delirium over the weekend. I was relatively busy, so...
Maybe. But I also think the people who rushed to defend him also didn't understand the problem, like Jenson Button, who I was subjected to as someone who watched Sky Sports all weekend. It was David Croft and Jenson Button, Sean.
I think your life would be immeasurably better if you would just not watch Sky Sports.
Probably. That's a very good point.
You might actually become a decent human being.
As my therapist, that's great advice.
I'm not a licensed therapist. I have to put it out there every time you say it.
Yeah, Jenson Button goes, it makes no sense why Hülkenberg's so off the pace compared to sprint to qualifying. Yeah, from the other guy that has no idea what the fuck a car is. From the other guy who let the entire grid catch up to him in 2009 after winning 6 of the first of the 7 races. I was like, yeah, this is perfect. This is such a perfect representation of everything I've been saying about both of them. So I won't go off on Nico anymore, but I just thought it was amazing to point out that everybody else adjusted, even Magnussen improved.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? For my sanity's sake, I hope there was a technical problem with Hülkenberg's car so I can stop this.
I just thought of a really great thing to do in the off season, Nick.
I'm listening.
You and I should take a trip to Germany. Nice little couples retreat, if you will.
That's cute. Can we get a spa date too?
I hear there's an F1 driver who has a quaint little B&B in Germany. We can get a couple of rooms there and spend our time sitting in the lounge reading Jenson Button's book.
Jenson Button owns a B&B in Germany?
No, Jenson Button wrote a book about his time in F1. Nico Hülkenberg owns a B&B in Germany.
It's probably great. Where is it? In what, Black Forest or?
No, I think it's around where he's from. I can't recall where it is.
I think it's like Karlsruhe.
Karlsruhe?
Karlsruhe.
It's not, but okay.
It's a cool name, so I thought I'd bring it up. Okay, anyways. My 2025 New Year's resolution is to be nice to Nico and be fair. After 2024 of beating a dead horse, as you say. So we'll go to his Airbnb one day. He'll probably have his only trophy, which is the F2. Anyway, Max's penalty in qualifying. Speaking of qualifying, and Max finding, God knows, I think at least a second between the sprint and qualifying. I'm not too sure, but it was a sizable amount.
It was a lot. It was good.
And Max gets pole for a second.
Mm-hmm. Well, for 4 hours.
4 hours. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah. And it's taken away for what probably the most ridiculous penalty ever, in my opinion, for impeding George Russell's slow lap.
That's wrong.
For driving too slow in George Russell's slow lap.
Unnecessarily slowly.
Okay. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, in my opinion. What the? Like, this is such a bad precedent to set by George. And you could see in the Sky Sports interview right afterwards that George goes, oh, well, you know, who knows what type of damage was done to my floor, and you should ask Max to see if he was purposely impeding, much like Damon Hill's bullshit with him and Michael Schumacher in 94 that I've gone over a million times and won't go over again. Like, you should ask Michael if he was trying to deliberately crash into me. Like, you knew it was coming just by the way of his wording. You knew he was going to play with the referee, as we say, or what's the word we use?
Appeal to the referee.
Appeal to the referee. You knew it was coming. and it was gross. I thought it was a fast lap. It wasn't. And I said, if it was a fast lap, yeah, this is no debate. Max deserved a 3-place grid penalty. But to make up a new precedent for a 1-place grid penalty for driving unnecessarily slowly, which is nonsense in itself, to help George? Question mark?
Mm-hmm.
Did that help George? It pissed off Max, clearly, which you don't want to piss off Max on a race day.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I could go off for hours on this. Like, what do you think?
To be honest with you, I couldn't stay awake during qualifying. I was watching it at 11 p.m.
Oh, no.
So I thought I watched it all. And I checked the results afterwards and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But I saw none of that. So I didn't actually see what caused this concern.
I could tell you if you want.
Go for it.
So Max is pulled over to the side, off the racing line, and then he has to get back on the racing line
To make the corner.
And George, who's on a cool down lap or a preparation lap, comes right behind him. Max's engineers didn't tell him. So Max doesn't see him until it's too late, but then eventually moves out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of allegation from Max that maybe George did that on purpose. Sped up all of a sudden, going into that corner. But yeah.
But the thing is, they're both on slow laps.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what keeps coming to my mind is an incident that happened between Lauda and who? I want to say Senna, but it couldn't have been Senna.
Prost,
Did
Rosberg.
Senna race at the same time as Lauda at all?
He would have, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe it was Senna and Lauda, where I think it was Senna accused Lauda of impeding him in qualifying and making a big stink about it and appealing to the referee type deal. But in that day, I don't believe there were any real penalties for it, let's say. And that pissed Nicky off. So he went out and he did a lap, and it wasn't a good lap because he didn't need to put in that lap because he was already on pole or something like that. He put in a lap and he's sitting out there on the cool down lap and he waited for, I believe it was Senna to come around, pulled out in front of him and slammed on the brakes. And then when inevitably there was another dust up in a conversation about it, he said, yeah, you accused me of impeding, so I figured I may as well impede. I don't condone that. I think that's stupid and it's extremely dangerous and it's out of character for Nicky Lauda, and who knows? I could have mixed that up completely. It could have been the other way around. Whatever the case was, I do recall an event like that happening. That was an intentional incident. That's not what happened here.
No.
The 1-place penalty is bizarre. When I first saw that, I thought, oh, George must have been on a fast lap about to set a pole position worthy lap, got impeded, and therefore a 1-place penalty, even though it's unorthodox, makes sense. Because that's, in my mind, a race director saying that's not right. The steward saying, well, if he had kept that pace, he would have gotten pole. Max impeded him, who was on pole. Therefore, switch him. That would have made sense to me.
That's what I thought too, yeah.
Finding out after the fact that they were both on slow laps, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. You've set a horrible precedent from this point forward. Now you can just jockey and game the referee and say, oh, well, look at my delta.
Right.
And if your delta is now 100th off, they have precedent to give you a penalty, which is unnecessary on slow laps, which don't matter.
Right. And the driving unnecessarily slowly is something that comes up in qualifying. And we've seen it a number of times, and it happens a lot at Monza, where they all back up at the end of the parabolica. They try and jockey for position to get clear air in front of them so that they don't lose out. And that's why we see people failing to set times at Monza, because they're stuck in this train of everybody backing up.
2019 is what you're talking about specifically, yeah.
Yeah, and a version of it happens most years now. It's gotten better. So that rule was put into place where you have a minimum lap time. You have to maintain a minimum lap time. You don't have minimum sector times, you don't have minimum speeds, but you have to hit a minimum lap time in qualifying. Fine. It's very rare that you see a penalty applied for violating the minimum lap time. Usually they cite, what's the word I'm looking for, Nick?
107%.
No, there's mitigating circumstances. Mitigating circumstances that led to them violating that lap time. Like, I was in traffic. I couldn't go faster because I was in traffic. Or something to that, right? Fine. I think maybe we've seen 1 penalty, 2 penalties come out of that. People who were legitimately driving under the lap time. But again, this is not what that is.
No.
They haven't said that Max failed to meet the minimum lap time. They said he was driving unnecessarily slowly. It was a bad call.
Very bad. And yeah. And now the permutations from this are endless. And someone like George Russell, who seems to be a daddy's boy, the real bully, someone who runs to the principal whenever everything isn't perfect to get his way, is now probably going to exploit that rule every chance he has. And by the way, so will Max, who, as we saw this year, will exploit rules to the extent whenever he has a disadvantage. So actually, George made himself look terrible and gave Max everything Max wanted.
Yes.
Really stupid in 360 degrees.
If there's one thing that Max is good at, it's violating rules, learning what the limit of the rule is, and then exploiting every inch of it that he can.
You saw it later in the weekend.
So, I've been very clear on this podcast that I don't like George Russell. He is abrasive to me. I think he's a whiny little bitch, and he's not that great. He deserves to be there, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
But
I want him on the grid, yeah.
He's not as good as people make him out to be.
No, and in a sense, he knows it if he's doing stuff like this. Like, what did you really gain? Like, do you think winning a championship is a witch's formula, like I brought up a million times here, where if I throw a little bit of Eye of Newt, crocodile skin or something, and then dash a penalty for my rival, that I'm going to be a world champion and start on first? Like, I'll start first, I'll win the race, I'll be in better position to win the race. No, you lost the race by the first corner.
Yeah.
Because you're not talented enough.
Yeah.
Or not good enough. Like, what did you gain by getting that extra position? Because Max said it in the interview. And here, I have the quote here. And he said something like, I'll just quote verbatim. Honestly, very disappointing, because I think we're all here. We respect each other a lot. And of course, I've been in that meeting room many times in my life, in my career with people that have raced. And I've never seen someone try to screw someone over that hard. And Max is pretty honest. We'll give him that. He's honest.
Yes.
To a fault.
Yeah. And it's a reasonable thing to say, because arguing with the stewards and with Max so aggressively had no purpose, because the lap you were trying to put in was not a fast lap. It wasn't even an attempt at a fast lap. It was a deliberate slow lap.
You're right.
There was no point in arguing it. Yes, get pissed off. Ask for them to look at it. But if it's clear that they're both on slow laps and Max had to make the corner, right? You can't stop on track. It would be more dangerous for him to have stopped to let Russell go through and then pick up, which was an option, and the stewards probably wouldn't have thought twice about it. But you shouldn't be doing that either.
And this is coming from a guy talking about safety or whatever, or stewards' decisions, that there's videos of him, like 7-minute compilations of just crashing into people and blaming them.
Yep.
So, like, if that was you, if you were Max and you got that penalty, you would have been livid. Absolutely fucking livid.
Yep.
And probably would have done the same.
Now, I think that's it for George Russell.
Well, I was hoping to talk about the Netflix fight he was planning between him, Jake Paul, and Max. Live on Netflix, because they've been having a war of words, so I guess we don't have to talk about it. But
Well, no, I was going to say we should talk about Max's part in that, because we've been giving George shit. We at least need to say something about Max.
okay, all right.
So what I will say is Max is very emotional and very hot-headed. So yes, he probably said a lot of things in that discussion that he shouldn't have said. Like, there's a quote I saw today about wanting to put Russell into the wall head first.
Yeah. I have it here. Yeah. I find his comics pretty ironic when he comes out and says, I'm going to purposely crash into you. I'm going to put your fucking head in the wall.
Mm-hmm. It's a stupid thing to say. It's unprofessional, but Max has proven time and time again that when it comes to competition, he's not really a human being. So it doesn't surprise me that Max says this. That being said, it's not a great image for him, but it's anybody who looks at Max and thinks he's a role model really hasn't paid attention to his career. He's anything but. He's a great driver. He seems to be a decent human being outside of the racetrack. But once he's on the track and there's something at stake, let's not use him as a benchmark. As a human being, that is.
Well, yeah, that's well adjusted. Yeah. He seems to be affecting Franco Colapinto because Franco now is dating a single mom as well. And Franco wants to be a champion. Guys, there are too many hot girls born after the year 2000. Anyways, sorry, I should probably cut that part out.
Yeah, you probably should.
That's closer to their age. I work in the service industry. I happen to notice things.
Nick, stop.
I've already
Stop digging.
I'm already on Jeffrey Epstein's list. Anyways, yeah, Max is imperfect, but out of the two of them, George is the bigger baby.
Yes.
So I don't know. That's one of the worst things I've ever seen in sport. I got a lot of flack by our European listeners this summer for saying that in European competition you get a lot of this bullshit. Should I just, because British bias is cool again, should I just say this you see a lot in a lot of British people, a lot of British competitors? Will that get us some friendly comments?
I have no comment.
Yeah, okay. Whatever it is, it was very ridiculous. Like, what did you think you were getting out of this? And I don't like it at all. I've never seen something like this in my life. Just for one position. And had you have not pissed off Max, you probably would have been more likely to win the race.
Yeah.
He's already wrapped up the championship. He knows there's no chance in the constructors. You could have snuck one by him, especially from second with the inside line.
Yeah, that definitely seemed like a bit of a fuck around and find out moment. Max may not have pushed so hard on the first lap.
Exactly.
And because why, yeah, he wants to win, obviously. He wants to get as much out of the season as he can. But is he going to risk it if George hadn't done that? Probably not.
Yeah, last year you saw him win every race just to get the records, just to get as high as he could. I think this year he realizes that's not the goal. This year it's just bring the car home as little damage as possible. We got more wind tunnel time next year. Let's refresh and regroup.
Mm-hmm.
Really stupid by George. But yeah, speaking of, the race was okay. Oh, that was an okay race.
Yeah, only because it was so dramatic.
Exactly. The most dramatic part, I think, yeah, we can talk about all the race, everybody's position. Yeah, we're going to get to that eventually. There's a lot of random finishers, like finishing positions for random teams. But Lando's penalty, the 10-second penalty.
Stop, go.
Stop, go. So the worst of all. So 35-second penalty, really.
Mm-hmm.
Even a 10-second time penalty, to me, would have made more sense.
Well, should we describe the difference between the two?
Sure, go for it.
So the 10-second stop-go is so damaging because the car has to come into the pits and has to stop for the full 10 seconds and then has to leave the pits without any work being performed. Whereas a 10-second penalty, you come into the pits, you stop in the box, you wait 10 seconds, they can change tires, they can change wings, they can do whatever, and then you leave.
Mm-hmm.
So Lando would not have been able to change tires, which usually if you have a penalty, they take advantage of that and try and get some sort of recovery by putting a better set of tires on, by doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't do that.
No.
So Lando would have had to make an extra pit stop effectively, which is 35 seconds in this case. A drive-through penalty would have been more reasonable but still harsh.
Mm-hmm.
And the drive-through is literally just drive through the pits at the speed limit.
Which Esteban Ocon did to himself in Vegas and Lewis Hamilton did to himself this in Qatar Grand Prix.
Did he?
Yeah, he wanted to retire the car, remember? But anyways, yeah, sorry. Go on. And then
Yeah, okay.
10-second time penalty.
Yeah, and then the 10-second time penalty would have been, in my opinion, the more appropriate thing. But I'm not a steward.
Which, yeah, you just add 10 seconds to your time. He probably would have built that gap between him and Max and whoever third place would have been at the time, which I think it was Oscar who could have slowed down, held off Leclerc.
Yeah, and the important thing to note is the 35 seconds that he lost put him in last place.
Yeah.
And not like he came out in traffic. He was out.
He had to catch up. And there was only 15 laps left at the time.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about why he got that penalty?
Yeah, we describe it. Yeah, I know why, and I think it's harsh in many ways. Also, it's just poor officiating, but give us a go.
So, I forget what lap it was, but one of Alex Albon's mirrors came off the car on the main straight, flew off, landed in the middle of the straight. Technically off the racing line, but on the track. And they called it a double waved yellow, which it's been a while since I've looked at this, but a double waved yellow would typically imply a more severe hazard on track.
It was described by Jensen and Crofty as essentially a red flag for that part of the circuit.
Well, that's a stupid explanation.
Obviously.
A double waved yellow means that the driver not only has to back off, they have to show a significant reduction in speed. It means that they effectively have to hit the brakes.
Or lift off.
No. You have to lift off for a yellow. You have to show that you're not trying to gain anything through a yellow. A double waved yellow means you have to make a legitimate effort to prepare to stop if needed. They typically put double waved yellows out if you're going to have a marshal near the track, right? Like if someone retires a car and manages to get it close enough to a marshal's post that they can just wheel it in, they'll typically handle that with double waved yellows, right? The marshal's not in danger because they're far enough from the track. Double waved yellows in that sector means everybody has to be puttering around. Fine. But I don't know about what Sky was showing, but that's not what I saw.
Go on.
My understanding is if you have a double waved yellow, it's going to affect the sector. So sector 1 would have had a double waved yellow.
Oh, wow.
That's not what we got. From what I saw in the race and what the F1 TV coverage was showing was one board. So they have marshals with flags and then they have digital boards along the track. And the digital board lights up green, red, yellow, blue, red and yellow, black and white, black and orange, all the different flags. And even Jolyon Palmer was saying he didn't know what that board was saying. I didn't see any flags. And someone might be able to show me, find a picture of a marshal waving 2 yellow flags. But I didn't see anybody waving flags.
It was so out in the corner. It was hard to see. Especially at Lando's speed, it was very hard to see.
Because it was a digital board.
Yeah, but they also did have some people waving the flags, but it was like hidden. That's what I'm getting at.
That's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Because why are they so invisible?
Yes.
Right? Now, Palmer said to him that looked like a yellow and red flag on the board, which is slippery surface.
Oh, wow.
Which sometimes they will put out when there's debris, which is effectively the same thing as a yellow flag. Be careful. Max saw it. Lando apparently didn't.
In Lando's defense, it was hard. It was split second.
Right.
Yeah, it was hard. Yeah, and red yellow would make a lot of sense. Which is why Max only said lift off.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like, just as an aside, finish your point. It sounds like some stewards didn't know what other stewards were doing, but
yeah, and this is the question. So from what I saw, and again, the coverage makes it hard to be sure exactly what's happening because you're not seeing it lap after lap. And if I had the patience to do it, I could sit there on board with somebody lap after lap and look at that start-finish straight. But to me, it appeared that the flags came out, the debris wasn't cleared, and the flags came in. So why was it okay to go racing again with the debris on the track when it wasn't okay to go racing with the debris on the track? Right? Someone made a decision to not do anything about that mirror, which was wrong.
This is a rhetorical question. Don't we have a VSC for this exact moment?
The comment that was made by the FIA is that the VSC would not have been effective because it doesn't bunch the pack up. The pack is still spread out around the track, and therefore you do not have a large enough gap for a marshal to get out there and remove the mirror.
Which literally, I hate using the word literally because these days Gen Z overuses it. Literally, all you needed was someone to jump over the fence, grab the mirror, and run back.
How do you get back over the fence?
Can't you run back behind the pit? Or can't you run through the pit exit, which it was right by the pit exit?
It's a lot further than it looks.
But still, you have cars on a VSC Delta going very slow and not off the racing line.
Very slow is not that slow, Nick. It's a dangerous thing to put a marshal on the track with cars coming by at speed.
Okay, so then the point I have is why not a safety car or a VSC? Why not just stop if you knew this was coming?
Right. And that's, if this was Charlie Whiting, that would have been a safety car. It would have been a 1 to 2 lap safety car, which is annoying for the teams because they don't get to abuse the pit stop advantage.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the safer thing to do. Throw a safety car, take them through the pits, have a marshal go out there, pick up the mirror, and get it off the track.
Mm-hmm.
That way they can approach from the opposite side. They don't have to jump over the pit wall. They don't have to try and jump back. They can come across the gravel trap, grab the mirror, take it back off the track. 2 laps behind the safety car, through the pits, no problem. Those punctures never happen. We don't end up with 3 safety cars.
Yeah. And yeah, effectively ruining Hamilton's race. It wasn't that bad at that point. Ruining Carlos Sainz's race on for a podium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was very poorly done.
Yep.
And then on top of that, with no clear direction, you give a major penalty to someone fighting with about to get big points. He wouldn't have won the race. Max would have won the race either way, but he would have finished second, maybe with the extra fastest lap point.
Yep. It is entirely possible that McLaren could have won the Constructors' Championship last weekend. Go ahead. Put your tinfoil hat on, Nick.
I was going to say Jordan did already if you listen to this week's episode of Formula for Success.
I didn't.
He goes off. He says, I'm not a conspiracy guy, but you're going to bring out the Ferrari and bringing this to Abu Dhabi conspiracy, right? Like you're going to say this was favoring Ferrari, which Ferrari's done either way. 21 points is still a huge gap to overcome. It's going to be hard. They're going to need one of Piastri or Norris to DNF, which they haven't done yet.
Yep.
But still, like an extra 18 points for Norris or 17 points for Norris is effectively done. Yeah, it kind of seems like that to me, but I have no proof for it. There's no real proof. But something's up there. I'm trying to play the conspiracy guy, but this one's a really tough one to do. It's really hard, to be honest.
So the answer that we got as to why that penalty was applied is basically that is the way the rule book is written. Failing to slow under double waved yellows, the penalty in the regulations is a 10-second stop-go. That is our new race director applying the rules as they are written.
So I think I know where you're going with this. What does that say about our new race director then? Is he trying to be like Massey towards the end, or the people who replaced Massey, which were going to be more literal? We're going to be more transparent?
Well, not like Massey, because Massey wasn't applying the literal interpretation. He was trying to be as, let's say, reasonable.
Media friendly.
Media friendly, yes. So the issue that ended up getting him fired that we've talked about previously is that by the book, he did nothing wrong, but tried to get us green flag racing to the finish.
We'll quote Kevin Magnussen. I think it sums up our belief perfectly. Wrong decision, right driver won. Anyways.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is definitely, to me, smacks of you want consistency, I will give you consistency. This is what the rule says. This is what we're going to do. No interpretation, no nothing. We're not playing games. We're not playing who's leading where or what does this mean for the championship. This is you failed to slow for yellow flags. 10 seconds stop, go penalty. It's right there.
This is as close to AI making decisions as possible as a human. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
But this is the way regulations are supposed to be written and observed.
That's the next step. Yeah. He's not wrong. And with all the bullshit you talked about a couple episodes ago going on with Ben Sulayem, who can't seem to get anything in order, who's firing the wrong people, you're going to see stuff like this. You're going to see someone follow the rule of the law to try and save their ass instead of applying the human emotion. Max Verstappen would be awful for a steward or a FIA race director, just as an aside.
He'd be great. He knows all the rules.
But he's not human.
Is that what we want?
Good question. Yeah, it goes. It's a problem with leadership again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we have this doom loop essentially. Like poor leadership fires someone who doesn't deserve it, and I'm making arrows here. So arrows pointing to the other in like a circle. You guys have all seen this meme. Poor leadership, fire the wrong person. Bad decisions are made. Comes back to poor leadership, fire the wrong person. Bad leadership is made. Mm-hmm. Couldn't think of a fourth thing to make it a perfect, circle. But anyways.
Yeah. Do you want to hear the latest nonsense from the FIA?
Of course.
There is a vote happening after this weekend's race on whether or not they should effectively eliminate the FIA Ethics Committee. The vote is to give control of the Ethics Committee to the FIA president and one other person, I forget who. The FIA president, Mohammed bin Sulayem, I think I said it right this time.
You did.
Would effectively be in control of the Ethics Committee.
Oh my God.
For those of you keeping track, Benny was being reviewed by the FIA Ethics Committee for trying to have Fernando Alonso's penalty overturned in Saudi Arabia, I think.
Yep.
He reached out directly to the stewards, allegedly, and told them to reverse the decision for reasons only he knows. And for that, he was referred to the Ethics Committee, and they reviewed, and surprise, surprise, they didn't find anything wrong with his conduct. But now, why do we need the Ethics Committee?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just give it to the president.
This is a completely normal reaction. Yeah. Yeah. If you're a power-hungry psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
Weren't we celebrating the end of Bernie because of stuff like this?
Yes. And again, Bernie was an FIA, but yes, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I understand it was different roles. I'm just saying, like, it was similar type of influence.
And Ben Hunt in Autosport put it pretty well, that this is a level of abuse we haven't seen since Sepp Blatter for FIFA.
Well said.
Ben Sulayem is up for election next year, or up for re-election, let's say, next year, right? So there's an FIA president election, and at this point, there is nobody else in the running for it. So it's entirely possible that next year comes around and he runs unopposed and wins by default and has control over the ethics committee, is firing all the stewards that know what they're doing, firing race directors, trying to enforce his idea of the rules. And he's come out with a statement about a lot of the stuff we talked about and a lot of the stuff that GPDA has brought up, and basically said, listen, I'm applying the rules. The rule says this, it needs to be this. Well, you heard my opinion on that last week.
Yeah, he needs to go.
And I realize that sounds a little hypocritical with what I just said about regulations and following rules, and that's the way that they're meant to be followed. But the difference here is when we're talking about driving standards and penalties, at least there is an ongoing discussion about whether or not these rules are valid, right? The stewards and the race director sit down with the drivers and the teams every weekend and discuss changes and updates to the rules and talk about the problems around them and actively try and fix it.
By drivers for the drivers.
Right. And what this really feels like is Benny decides to say, this is what I want to do. Fuck you guys. We're doing it this way.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yes.
Give this guy any more power, he will be worse.
Yes.
Maybe Eddie Jordan should run a campaign against him.
I think that would end terribly.
Yeah. But it'll be fun. It'll be fun for us. And at least it'll show that there was the potential for a choice, if there really is. Liberty Media is pretty clear. This is a U.S. venture. There's going to be more Saudis involved. There's going to be more Saudi races or Emirati races. I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm just saying.
No, but Liberty has nothing to do with the FIA.
I'm not getting this, I
You're
guess.
clearly
I'm not getting it. To anybody who watches It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the implication, I'm not getting it. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'll spend the off season drawing you a diagram.
You're going to have to. Clearly. All right. That's enough of this asshole. Let's talk a little bit more about the race. Gasly comes 5th. Alpine might be back. I think it makes sense that they finish 6th. More than likely, it's going to be hard for Haas to overturn a 5-point deficit based on what Magnussen and Hulkenberg have done all year. It'll take a miracle. It's possible.
I mean, Alpine's trying hard to give them that.
To give them 6th?
Yeah.
More win. They want more wind tunnel time, you think?
No, I'm being facetious.
Well, because of Doohan, yeah, which is another point. Who's coming in for Ocon with a race left.
There you go.
But apparently he's the most prepared rookie. Apparently he's been a big part of their upgrades.
If they treated him the same way they treated Piastri, I believe it. Time will tell.
Doesn't look good. I think he might be one of the worst of all the choices there. Because I talked about it before. There was a shootout between him and Schumacher, and he lost by Alpine engineers and the journalists who were there. So he's already on that handicap. He's also had 1 million replacements lined up by Briatore. Allegedly only given a 5-race contract. And you're right. Why would they want to jeopardize this position with a rookie who could easily crash in the first corner? And it wouldn't be his fault. It's like Colapinto. It's not his fault. We can't blame Doohan if he fucks up. It's his first race.
I don't agree with that.
Tell me
if
why.
he is the most prepared rookie, and he has had the FP1 sessions, and he has had private testing in ground effect cars, right? Because they're allowed to test 2-year-old cars. So he's been out testing with Alpine's test team in ground effect cars. So he knows what this car feels like in real life, not just in the simulator. In my opinion, if he goes out and crashes in Abu Dhabi, that's a bad sign. It is his fault. Unless, of course, he gets taken out or there's some circumstance that makes it not his fault. But if he has a rookie-type crash, obviously we give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt. But he doesn't get as much sympathy in my books as Colapinto would. Or Behrman.
Colapinto gets all my sympathy. Behrman gets none. Yeah, sometimes there's cases like if Ocon is struggling with this car, Doohan might come into it and also not qualifying well. Like, I know we don't like Ocon, but I'm positive he could get more out of that car than Doohan, right? No matter what amount of testing he's had.
I think this is part of their calculus, though, where they looked at it and went, well, Ocon's been shit the last few races. So Doohan really can't do worse in their mind.
And then you send off Ocon, give him like a thank you, allegedly, so he can test with Haas. But we all know it's kind of like a disrespect. I think P1's Matt and Tommy, who I 99% of the time disagree with, nailed it. They said this is payback for Monaco. This is a shot at him on the way out.
Yeah, and I heard some rumblings about this where earlier in the season we had confirmation that Alpine was going to allow Ocon to test with Haas after Abu Dhabi. No stipulations to it, just, yeah, sure. You can drive for them that weekend. right? It's after the Grand Prix. The season's technically over. Fine. Your contract may not be ended, but we'll allow you to. Right? So a verbal agreement allowing him to get ahead next year. Fine. Now what I'm hearing is they didn't want to honor that verbal agreement. And that created a sticking point where Haas wanted him. Ocon wanted to be there. Alpine said no, potentially as a way to screw both of them effectively because they are fighting for the championship now. So why give Haas any benefit for next year? Right? When they were P9, P10 in the constructors, it didn't matter. But now it matters. So it makes sense for them not to want it. But then that's when people like Toto Wolff, who is still Ocon's manager, get involved and say, well, no, he's going to be there because that's what's best for him. And then we end up in situations like this where the team effectively has to fire him.
But Alpine is not going to be in this position next year. We've documented it. It's not getting better. They're getting rid of the Alpine engine, the Renault engine at the end of next year. Haas is improving. They're going to get, like, in spite of how much we hate Ocon, they're going to get more points with him than they would with Hülkenberg and Magnussen. And in spite of Bierman, they'll do a lot better. So I'm guessing 100 points to Ocon, 5 to Bierman. You heard it here first. So that doesn't track with me. Like, if you're blowing it now because to help yourself for next year, you're not helping yourself next year.
No, but I think they think they're helping themselves for next year because Ocon's not part of their deal next year. Duan is. Let's see what he looks like in a race. Right? Let's get him more testing, effectively. And look at their trajectory this year. Haas has been relatively stable.
Because of their drivers.
They've been doing good, but they've been relatively stable. Alpine has been on an exponential trajectory. They've gotten better.
Yeah, but you're not going to get 33 points out of nowhere. More than likely not next year.
They're not if they go into the season thinking that way. They have to go in thinking big. And at this point, there's not anything to tell them that they couldn't be where they are. Especially if they've gotten rid of a lot of the dead weight that caused this problem.
Yeah, but then they added a rookie dead weight. Mercedes is going to have this problem. Mercedes apparently hired Antonelli.
But their risk assessment has said that Duhan isn't that much of a risk because we've invested millions, if not tens of millions of dollars in training him to drive this car.
Doesn't always work out.
I'm not disagreeing with that, but you can't say one way or the other at this point. They've done everything they can to minimize the risk. The risk is never gone, but they have to do something. And they can't go in going, oh, well, we put a rookie in the seat, so we're fucked. That doesn't make sense either.
I think that was more Briatore shoving him in. Because Briatore manages him. Duhan.
Sure.
Teams will cut their nose to spite their face. Haas 2023 being the prime example. With Hülkenberg. Just to spite Mick. In my opinion. But we will see. We will see.
We will see.
We will see. The other piece of news was Zhou finishing 8th, getting Sauber's first points. I don't think it would have been Sauber's first points if they could have done a proper pit stop at the beginning of the year. Bottas would have definitely got it 3 different times, including Bahrain, including Japan, where he was 7th. Had a bad pit stop and came out behind 6 different people. Zhou kind of fell into this. He made one overtake the entire race, which was on Tsunoda on soft tires that were worn down. Now, kudos to him for keeping that 8th. But he would never have got that if he had to actually fight for it. It was a situation of circumstance.
Yeah,
That's
they
my
got lucky.
Yeah, they got very lucky.
Yeah.
Kudos to them. They're all excited about it. What pisses me off is that has reignited Zhou to Ferrari as their reserve driver.
It hasn't. You're just seeing it now. That's been around since before this race.
I understand, which makes it actually even worse. That they were going to give him the reserve driver, or had rumored to give him the reserve driver gig before this. I'm just saying it's almost justified it. Like you heard David Croft have a very flagrant orgasm on the Sky Sports broadcast when Zhou Guanyu was in 8th and it was looking like he was going to win driver of the day, David Croft said, yes, yes. Probably masturbating underneath the broadcast. Like Jeffrey Toobin on CNN, if you remember during COVID times. Got fired for that. I'm just, okay, I know I'm being ridiculous, but there was definitely at least, he at least touched himself quickly.
I'm going to say it again. You just need to stop watching Sky Sports.
Definitely. I'm going to definitely think about buying the F1 app for next year. What, $70 or something? $79?
I don't even think it's that much.
Amazing. But holy crap. Ferrari, if you drop the first act of Fred Vasseur as Ferrari team principal was to drop Mick Schumacher out of the family. But if you value the son of the last guy to give you every championship you had less than the guy who was a second and a half off the pace regularly, I will not only cheer against you next year, I will actively, as this podcast gets more popular, actively work against you in every way I can to destroy your credibility, do whatever I can, short of doxing them. Holy shit, I'm pissed when I see stuff like that. They value Zhou more than Michael Schumacher's son. They didn't give Michael Schumacher's son a lifeline. Michael Schumacher, who made his name at Ferrari. They value his son less than the guy who was a second and a half off the pace regularly in qualifying.
So, I think you're just off base on all the points. They didn't have a spot on a team when his junior driver contract was running up. Right? So, yeah, they could have given him a reserve drive.
A lifeline, something.
Sure. Who says he wanted it? If you're Mick Schumacher and you're trading on the name and there's an open F1 seat, why wouldn't you take it? Or if your father's other team that invested in him heavily comes along and says, hey, come over here, why wouldn't you take it? I don't believe that the separation of Mick Schumacher and Ferrari had anything to do with the decision to disrespect him in any way.
I think it did. That'll always be my disagreement with you.
It was hey, we don't have a place to put you. We can give you this. And then it was likely, no, I don't want that. I don't want to sit in Maranello and play a video game all day, effectively. I don't want to do laps around Fiorano in a year-old car trying to figure out what works and doesn't work for an upgrade.
Why not a path back to Formula One like Wolff offered him, which will never happen? But why not something? Why not some gesture? The point is not Mick. The point is that they value Zhou. They're actively seeking him.
They don't.
They shouldn't.
How many reserve drivers does Ferrari have?
Schwartzman and Giovinazzi. So he would be the third.
Giovinazzi races their WEC team.
So Giovinazzi's no longer a reserve driver?
As far as I know, he doesn't. He's got too much work to do elsewhere.
I think, from my understanding, he would be the main. So I don't even think Schwartzman would be involved.
Schwartzman is a reserve driver. I believe he still has a role next year. We have Behrman, who is still technically the reserve driver.
But he'll have a seat.
Yeah, obviously that doesn't happen next year. They're looking at Zhou, sure. And there's got to be at least one more.
Pedro De La Rosa.
No, that's Aston Martin.
I know, I was joking. Yeah.
You and I talked about it briefly before this started. Daniel Kvyat used to be their reserve driver as well. For all I know, he may even still be there. These reserve drivers don't get anything. They're there to run the simulator, run old cars around the track with upgrades to see how they perform. There is nothing in it except a paycheck to do the same thing over and over and over again. The reason they have so many is to not burn them out, because they have to, after everybody goes to sleep, they have to be in the simulator, testing different setups, testing this, testing that, trying to see if they can improve on what's been done on track that day, right? So this is not anything about valuing what Zhou does. This is, hey, this is a guy with F1 experience who's been in this hardware, who knows this engine, right? It's the same engine, who knows what these things feel like, and who knows, I'm sure Zhou is in the simulator at Sauber as well.
No, probably not. Based on how bad they've been doing all year, there's definitely been no extracurricular work.
You can't say that.
Probably
That's
not.
what's going on in your mind, but you have no fucking clue
Exactly.
what you're talking about. So, he knows how these things feel. And that's what Ferrari sees. He's cheap, because if Ferrari is anything, they're cheap, whether it's F1 or road cars.
He's cheap and he brings a lot of sponsorship.
He's cheap, he brings Chinese money, and he knows what the cars feel like.
From my understanding, it's a lifeline to potentially get him back in F1, which please don't do that after what we've seen this year.
There's absolutely no way Ferrari puts him in a car.
Cadillac, they push him for the Cadillac gig.
No.
Please don't. You're right. You everything you said is right. I'm just saying. Please don't. This is not even about Mick. This is just please keep Zhou off the grid. For the love of God. Colapinto. Apparently interest has cooled on him.
Sure.
I think it's ridiculous. Right? Like, I think, like, the reasons... If you valued all these things about him a month ago, they're all still there. He's just crashed now.
Yeah. And you and I talked about it. This is how fickle the grid is. All right, 2 races he does well. He's God.
Mm-hmm.
Has a couple of crashes. Not so good anymore. You and I talked about James Vowles ruining his career by only giving him 5 races.
9 races.
9 races, sorry. Is it 9 races?
It's 9 races, yeah.
Jesus Christ. 9 races, I guess, including sprints, right?
Mm-hmm. More
Yeah.
so, yeah, 12 then. Yeah.
Oh, shit. It would have almost been better for his career had he not had 9 races. Had he only had 3 races, then he would have had something to say, oh, look at my performance. But give him 9 races, and he has the ability to fall back, have a couple of mediocre performances, and then he's not so good. Now, that's not to say he's actually not good. He's probably perfectly fine to be on the F1 grid. He's probably a mid-pack running driver. But he had a couple of good performances, so now everybody's crowned him the next Senna.
Thank you. This is what I was saying in the height of it all. What happens when times are bad? What happens when mistakes are made? I get some things right. There was a lot of hype around Colapinto for the wrong reasons, was what I was getting at weeks ago.
Yeah.
But now the right reasons, like the right mistakes have been made with him that can signal a potential trajectory upward. A year at VCARB would be excellent, especially if Sergio Perez is leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it's a done deal now. Horner said, and I quote, "I will leave it up to Sergio to make his own conclusions." What does that tell you? Retire or get fired? In my opinion.
No. What we've heard from the team, this is where people read between the lines that don't exist. What we've heard from the team is that he has signed a contract with Red Bull for 2025 and beyond.
2026 too, yeah.
And when I hear Horner get out there and say things like, I'll let Sergio make the decision, without looking at what all the speculation is, what does that tell you? That tells me Sergio's got a contract for 25. He gets to decide whether he stays or goes.
That's a good point.
If you read exactly what's been put out there, that's what that says.
That's a very good point.
Now, I don't think that's true. I think you're right. It's going to be, hey, Sergio, you have a contract, but oh, by the way, that's a Red Bull contract. That doesn't necessarily imply you have a racing seat.
You're 277 points off of Max right now. And allegedly there was 100-point clauses. And you lost the Constructors. Had you have kept it within 100 points, we win the Constructors.
Mm-hmm.
By a mile.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. So we don't know what that contract contains. People speculate. But apparently it has, if not been confirmed, but been very highly implied that there are several performance clauses in the contract. So, again, he's got a contract for 25-26, and they may keep him similar to how they kept Danny.
Reserve.
Not even a reserve, an ambassadorial role. You bring in a lot of money, you bring in a lot of sponsors, go out and do all the media, shake the hands, smile, kiss some babies, sell some Kit Kat, but you're not going to be in that seat.
I don't want to speculate because I know your answer. You're right. Until it's done, let's not try and war game who gets what seat.
Season's done on Sunday.
We'll find out then.
We'll find out Monday. I guarantee it.
Yeah. So you and I will wait till then. Anything else you want to talk about Qatar before we just give some quick Abu Dhabi predictions?
Qatar, let's see. I'm sure there was something.
I think we hit all the major points. The the no safety car, Gasly, Colapinto, Perez was a big deal. Perez's spin under the
Perez's spin
under the safety car.
Yeah. So that was bizarre because all of a sudden behind the safety car, he just starts tumbling back.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is under the safety car, you're not allowed to pass anybody. That's clear. The only time you're allowed to pass somebody is when there's clearly a mechanical problem. So even if Sergio had slowed drastically, everybody would have had to stay behind him. He would have had to show that he is physically not able to continue, which wasn't clear at the time because we weren't watching him. But at that point, you're like, what the fuck happened? You're in the safety car. Did your car actually blow up on a safety car lap? No. He fucking binned it. With a rookie mistake over a curb. At least I think it was over a curb. Spun the car. And then should have been able to get going again. But he burnt out the clutch. He destroyed the clutch on that car trying to get it pointed in the right direction.
Unbelievable.
Now, you and I saw the size of those clutches. They're absolutely tiny, but they're not weak. And it's not the first time he's had incidents like that. So what the hell happened? The car was fine, except for the clutch.
I don't know. I don't know what happened, and if I don't know any better, he's trying to get out. Like he's trying to say, like, "Hey, please fire me."
Who knows?
Who knows? He should have taken any opportunity he had mid-season to leave, but yeah, that's his problem. Oh yeah, I guess there wasn't much else about Qatar F2. We'll talk more about that, I think.
That's what I wanted to shoot. Yeah, thank you.
F2 was great this weekend. It was amazing.
It's not even F2 that I wanted to talk about. It's F1 Academy.
Oh, okay.
Abby Pulling was crowned the F1 Academy champion and then decrowned, if that's a word.
Oh shit, I didn't see that.
Somebody got their math wrong.
She's what, half a point away from winning or something, or
1 point. So there are, I think it's 81 or 82 points remaining because they have 3 races a weekend. They have points for pole. They have points for fastest lap, whatever. So there's 82 points, I believe, remaining. And she's 81 points ahead of the next closest competitor.
so like F2, if she gets pole, she's champion. 2 points for pole, right, or something like that, or 3 points for pole.
If she gets a fastest lap, she's technically the champion. Like it's
1 point in the sprint, yeah.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. I get why they backpedaled, but she's got it. It's just unheard of that you get a champion crowned and then get it taken away.
Yeah, so she would have to DNF all 3 races, and her opponent would have to win all 3 races maximum. Highly unlikely.
With pole position and fastest lap in all the races.
Oh, okay. It's highly unlikely then. I did see someone who comes up on my YouTube a lot, Nina Gadaman. She's a sim racer.
Okay.
She is, I think, in like British Formula 4 for women or something, or probably just the regular British Formula 4. As is, she's going to be in the academy next year. It's pretty cool. She's really good. I learned a lot from her, actually, from her videos. So
yeah,
interesting to see her next year. F2 is going down to the wire. We'll talk about it more next week.
Yeah, they're what, half a point apart?
Yeah. Hadjar did something, actually. I'll talk about this quickly, that pissed me off, just in terms of competitiveness. I've talked to him on this podcast a lot about how much I admire Michael Jordan and his like wanting to win and beat the person around him and not wanting to lose in any way. Hadjar was celebrating the fact that Bortoleto couldn't get 5 seconds ahead of him with that 5-second penalty. Celebrating loudly on the radio that he ended up finishing second, even though Bortoleto, I think, was within 0.3 of getting 5 seconds ahead of him in like 10 laps or 8 laps or something. That's kind of lame, dude.
So you don't like the fact that in your mind, Hadjar did the bare minimum to keep Bortoleto from outscoring him?
He barely did. Bortoleto was gaining at like half a second a lap.
Right, but that's what I mean. In your mind, it was the bare minimum Isaac Hadjar could do to keep the championship going. He should have pushed to get in front of Bortoleto on track, in your mind.
Well, that's what I would celebrate.
Right.
Right? Like if that happened at the end of the race, I'd be like, "Oh, tough race. Let's do better next weekend." I can't finish behind Bortoleto. I can't hope he gets a penalty every weekend. Didn't like it. And Red Bull's a little iffy about him. That doesn't look good in my mind. But my mind is, you can finish that sentence.
I think we'll see him on the track next year in F1.
We might. Good possibility of it. Let's give some quick Abu Dhabi predictions, unless you want to add something else about Hadjar.
No, not about Hadjar. What I want to add, we can do it as part of the Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
It's more relevant there.
So as Kimi Räikkönen once said, and I've said this before on this podcast, the first 3 corners are quite good and the rest of the course is quite shit.
Well, they've changed, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 6, 7, 8? There was a chicane kind of at the far end of the track. They've taken that out. They've made it a long sweeping corner. That improved that section, but I think Kimi's still right. 1 to 5 now are okay. The rest is shit. It's basically 5 corners and 3 straights.
And it's usually an irrelevant race except for 2021.
Yeah, I don't like the track. All these desert tracks, with the exception of Bahrain, have 0 elevation. There's no character to them.
No.
They're big karting tracks, basically.
I won't say what's on my mind right now, but most of them need to go. But we will see more of them and more street courses before our lives are done, Sean.
Oh, that's something we should say. Just on that note, one of our least favorite races is disappearing.
Thank God.
Zandvoort is only on the calendar until 26.
Good. What did you say? I want to say, because you said it first.
Good riddance?
Good riddance. Yeah. So it's just a weird track. I don't like bank corners, you know what I mean? Like the Indianapolis,
Yeah,
NASCAR
that's your
corners.
own nonsense. You just need to get over that.
I just don't like them. I'm just saying that, and that seems to be the selling point of it, and the rest of the course just kind of meh. Doesn't bring out great racing unless there's rain on and off.
Yeah, which is part of what makes that race entertaining, is that, the weather is inconsistent, but it's artificial in my mind. The track isn't that great.
No.
I don't care about the banking. It's part of the track, sure, but the track as a whole doesn't elicit much entertainment.
No. We saw this year was one of the most boring races. Anyways.
Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi. So it looks like Max is back, but I imagine McLaren and Ferrari are going to put everything into this weekend. So Ferrari will have a DNF and a strategy fuck up.
Yep.
And McLaren will get an unnecessary penalty. So, how do I want to do this? Lewis's send-off, has he really ever been good at Abu Dhabi?
Yes.
Yes and no.
I think he leads the number of wins in Abu Dhabi, does he not?
Actually, yeah, he won 2014, 15, 16. Even though Rosberg won, he still won 16.
Mm-hmm.
Abu Dhabi used to be at different times, too. It wasn't always the last.
It's been the last for a good while now. I want to say for 10 years it's been the last.
I want to say I wanted to put Lewis 1. That's why I asked that question, but I don't know.
The car is good, and in weekend warm-up today, they were saying that it is colder this year than it has been. That's today on the Thursday. Doesn't mean Sunday will be cold.
Sunday's projected to be 27 and sunny.
So it's colder than it has been previously, but that's not cold.
No. So it's hard to put a Mercedes up there. Should I do Max? Should I do Sergio? No.
Do Bottas. I think he's pissed off.
He should be. He should be.
And I guarantee you if Bottas wins, he ends up in the Red Bull seat next year.
I saw somebody online post, it was Dan No Skill on YouTube, post a picture apparently on Red Bull's website. There was an option to get Valtteri Bottas on the back of the shirts. There's an option to get Max, option to get Sergio, and there's apparently a Bottas option.
I'm sure there's an option to get your own name on it, and somebody simply put Bottas on there.
Maybe, yeah. I was going to say, it looked like a deep fake to me, but I wonder.
As Abraham Lincoln once said, you can't believe everything you read on the internet.
Abraham Lincoln said that
Yes,
while he was hunting vampires.
yes.
Okay, good to know.
Case in point, Nick.
What a stupid movie. Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter?
Anyway, Abu Dhabi, yeah?
You know, I'm still going back and forth on mine. Do you have a clear-cut top five?
I'm going to say it's Norris, Oscar, Carlos, Max, and Lewis.
That's a good top five.
I think the McLaren is a good car, and barring any potential stupidity like we saw in Qatar, they're both going to be there. Carlos wants to go out on a high. I think he puts it, he either finishes on the podium or he doesn't finish. I think that's his current state at Ferrari. Max will do well, but the car does seem to be inconsistent, and Lewis will do just enough.
It's inconsistent or it isn't. I'm gonna go with my gut. I'm gonna put Max 1. Because I think he also wants to end on a high. I think he also wants to start a streak.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've been going back and forth about this. Like, do I want to just go with the hype around Qatar? I think if Norris finishes second, I think it's pretty much guaranteed that they get the constructors, right? McLaren?
I mean, at this point, if both cars finish in the points, they're likely to get the constructors.
So I'll put Norris second. I'll put Charles third. I'll put Lewis fourth. I'm going to put Yuki fifth. A lot to prove for that Red Bull seat, potentially. And he's really good at Abu Dhabi. Finished sixth last year, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, this is one of their historically good tracks.
So I'll put him there.
Okay.
Do you have a 10th in mind?
Perez, just to cap it off on a high.
I want to say Lawson, which apparently he's the go-to for the Red Bull seat right now, which is ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Absolutely ridiculous. But I will go Bottas instead. I wanted to put Gasly there, but I think Gasly might do like a 9th. Just enough. I think Hülkenberg and Magnussen, one of them will get 7th or 8th, but I don't think both.
Okay.
I think it's going to be just enough for Alpine.
Yeah.
What do you got for an outlier?
Sorry, before we go into that, I just thought of a potential technical reason why they would choose Lawson over Yuki.
Why is that?
Yuki's height. Not that Max is a big guy, but compared to Yuki, everybody's a big guy. And that's not an insult to Yuki, he's just short. And being able to set up a car for people who are so drastically different in size is a problem. We saw it with, I think, Ocon and Gasly, where Gasly was complaining about the cockpit of that Alpine being set up for someone like Ocon, who is taller. I think the claim is he's 6'4", but he's not 6'4".
6'1", I bet you.
At most.
Yeah.
But he has long arms compared to Gasly. Same thing with George and Lewis. Lewis isn't short necessarily, but George is taller, and that created that whole cockpit positioning nonsense from earlier in the year.
Which I remember you talking about was favorable to Lewis. It was favorable to a shorter guy. Something along those lines.
Yeah, but where they placed the cockpit relative to that was not what he was used to. And there was another one. Well, was it? Anyway, a large offset in heights creates setup issues, especially if you're swapping chassis between drivers, because then you have different pedal positions. You have all sorts of changes and setup tweaks that need to happen. It's all perfectly doable. It just creates compromises in how comfortable certain drivers are. So if they wanted to give a bullshit reason but make it look like they weren't being biased, they could say Lawson's relatively the same size as Max, therefore it's the decision.
I think that you're thinking of Hülkenberg and Magnussen. I think Hulk's almost 6 and Magnussen's surprisingly short.
That's not who I was thinking of, but
But yeah, and they just don't want Yuki. I think they never did.
no, you're absolutely right.
But why did you string him along like this? For how many years?
Because he's been successful in that car.
Yes and no. Compared to Gasly, no. And that's like, I'm not saying he's bad. I've come around to Yuki with this podcast. I'm just saying that you've gone backwards not because of him, but he hasn't compensated. So why not let him have other ventures and potentially other teams?
I don't think they're stopping him. If he had other people asking and they told him that there was no way he was getting the Red Bull seat, I think he'd be somewhere else. I don't think anybody's asking for him.
So they're stringing him along, you think? Potentially,
Yeah, I
you
think
could
so.
get it. Yeah. Okay. No. We'll see. Well, we'll see in a week.
Yeah.
What's your outlier?
So I'm not sure how close you've been looking at Instagram, but Hulkenberg had a rather good Instagram post this week.
I'll look it up now.
It is a picture of the track with a pair of shoes and a bowling ball, and a caption something along the lines of "Last race of my career, going out or helping Hulk get a podium."
I don't see it on Hulkenberg, or you mean Magnussen?
Sorry, Magnussen, not Hulkenberg.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I did hear about that, where Magnussen is gonna just destroy everybody finally to help him. Yeah, which is the only way he's gonna get it. Go on.
So I think that is. Just gonna say screw it. That's my prediction.
It's not on his official. Yeah, it was a I did see that one. Yeah, it's a fake,
Sure,
but I like it. It is the only way he gets a podium.
Hulkenberg gets a podium. That's my.
The average Formula One commentator or journalist at the beginning of 2023 said Hulkenberg gets a podium in 2023.
Okay.
It's not as much of an outlier as that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying you're wrong for saying it. I'm saying a lot of people believe this is inevitable. So maybe it's today. Maybe it's this weekend.
I mean, with a career as long as his, it's statistically statistically unlikely that he goes this long without getting a podium. But
Yeah, I've been over that a million times, so I won't say it again. What should be my... Ooh, you've just given me an idea. Magnussen on the podium for his last race. That, to me, is more likely.
well, that would be Haas's first podium, right?
Mm-hmm. He's got their only pole. He's their longest-serving driver for some reason. Why not take their first podium?
Mm-hmm. Why not?
Why not?
Go out on a high.
Yeah, because nobody else wants him. This is he said his third last race in Formula One. He's been given 3 fucking chances to do nothing.
Do you know one of the teams he's raced with in WEC?
BMW?
That's where he's going next year.
Oh, that's right. What is one of the teams he's raced in?
Cadillac.
Fuck off. Not again.
Oh, I had to do it.
Fuck off. They will give him every chance in the book. There's an illusion. Like, Jordan and Coulthard, I love them. I really do enjoy listening to their podcast, but they just make the case like, yeah, Kevin Magnussen's just as good as anybody on any given day. They said that a couple races ago. They said Joe is, he's kept up with Bottas the entire time he's been there. No. I just think there's just delusion around Formula One media and with certain drivers. Not just Joe, not just Magnussen, just everybody. Thanks a lot for ruining my day. Fuck, man. We just got rid of this guy, finally. Not again.
But it's the MO. He spends a year out, he comes right back.
And he'll do great his first race, like he does every time. And then disappear and self-destruct. Please, Cadillac.
Anyway.
It's better than Romain Grosjean and Logan Sargent.
Yeah, well, it's going to be Colton Herta and Kevin Magnussen.
Ugh.
Not great.
I like Colton. I don't like him. I just want to see if he's good or not.
He's not.
He's probably not. Anyways, on that note,
Well,
I'm gonna go throw up.
there's potentially a better piece of news. The lineup for post Abu Dhabi testing for Haas. So you remember the partnership that they signed a few weeks back with Toyota? And one of the stipulations is that their drivers get experience in F1 machinery. Have you seen the lineup for the post-race test?
Is Miata Honda or is he Toyota?
Miata is Honda.
Honda.
Oh, sorry. Miata is Toyota. Sorry.
So that's probably one.
No. They've bypassed Miata on that one.
Wow. Well, he is doing FP1
Yeah.
tomorrow, so yeah. Who is it?
Rio Haryanto.
Him again? Wasn't he in Formula One? Briefly?
Was he? I don't know.
I think so, in like 2018. Something random. I'll look it up now. But yeah, go on.
Well, he's Toyota's WEC driver for their hypercars. And he's been one of the staples at that team for a while, and he raced with Alonso and is responsible for a lot of the success that team has had.
12 Grand Prix in 2016. I'm guessing Marussia. Oh, Manor. Sorry. There you go.
Which is the same team.
Okay, so he's on it. Who else?
Well, it's him and Ocon.
Gross.
I thought that was clear. We talked about that.
Yeah. I thought there was more.
No.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see a Toyota driver and another Japanese driver on the grid. Now, you can say whatever you want about what?
He's Indonesian.
Oh, is he?
Whoops.
Oops.
He does look Japanese. I'll give you that. I just made it worse. Okay. Anyways.
Yeah, you did. Anyway, great to see a Toyota driver getting involved. It shows me that Toyota is legitimately interested in who do they have in their stable if they were to do this.
That's a good point.
Miata's racing FP1, or is testing FP1. Rio Haryanto is testing after the race. Toyota hasn't committed it to anything, but to me it sounds like they're teeing up to say, okay, in 26, if we decide to do this, if we decide to start investigating, who do we have? And where do they stand relative to everybody else? Now, I will need to confirm if that is the right guy and that I didn't just pick a name out of my ass, but
We're just making this worse by the second. 2030, we did talk about that a couple weeks ago. I think you and I came to that conclusion. I think we're right. I think we will see them end of the decade.
I think they watch what happens with Cadillac, and if Cadillac can do it, they say that they go for it.
Which is great. There's been a lot of talk about potentially high tech taking the 12th team spot, or somebody else jumping in just to fill the Concord agreement, right? But like Toyota, I think, is a serious contender, and they weren't great back in the day, but they weren't bad. It was a different time. It seems like this is more entry friendly these days. Mm-hmm. In terms of finance, not in terms of actually getting you in. Like Andretti showed us, they will fight tooth and nail to keep you out. But once they allow you in, it's very easy to keep a team. Like Haas should not be there by old standards, but they are.
Right.
So, yeah. On that note, there's a lot.
I was wrong. Absolutely. Hirakawa.
Okay. So I can cut out the last 10 minutes.
Yes, that makes sense because Haryanto isn't on. Yeah, no, that was me fucking that one up.
It's funnier if we leave it in, just for the record.
You can leave it in because now I'm eating shit and saying that it's not the same person. It's Rio Hirakawa.
Okay.
Who, yes, is their WEC driver.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of weird that they would want to come back 14 years later with the driver that didn't do that well in Haryanto. I've ate way more shit on this podcast. On that note, I'm excited for the last Grand Prix. We'll come back for one more recap, and then Sean and I are going to take a much-needed break.
Where I don't have to listen to Nick.
Shut up.
And yes, Hirakawa is definitely Japanese.
Okay.
But
Good.
He's old.
How old?
He's old by F1 standards. He's 30.
Well, that is old by 30 with the F1 standards. Yeah, nobody starts their career at 30.
No.
So it might be Miata and somebody else. Ralph Schumacher had a good relationship with Toyota. Anyway.
Yeah.
F1_philosophy on Instagram. F1 Philosophy at YouTube. Don't worry about the fantasy league. We'll do it. Sign up next year at f1philosophypod@gmail.com for next year.
Yes.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.